hey, time to put your metal to the test now. Bop, 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 up. Hey, don't you know you're messing with the best now? Uh-huh.
Give me a second.
If we're supposed to be hearing something, we can't hear it over the Zoom.
God damn it! Oh, man. Is it not coming through?
No.
Not at all. We're not hearing that.
I just realised
this
microphone comes through really quiet, so they're not going to hear me turning pages pretending to be Russell Brand.
Oh, God.
I had a whole thing. I've got a real book. It was going to end with me finding...
That's okay. Just narrate yourself, Tip.
I'm just going to read the relevant passage that was going to be the punchline. When he released into the sucking nozzle, once she'd worked it down his shaft, she quickly cupped his balls, feeling them pulse as they emptied in rhythmic spurts. She began pulling them, squeezing as she did so, milking them like udders, the way the good little cows preferred.
And this is Russell Brand's memoir?
No, what I described was inherently more legal. I combined two great goofs. One, I was going to make fun of that Russell Brand clip of him trying to find that Bible passage on Piers Morgan.
Right.
And then that was leading to me reading an excerpt of a book that's been upsetting the right wing. Morning Glory Milking Farm. A monster bait romance by C.M. Nascosta.
Monster bait is very good. That's very
monster
good.
Monster bait. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was Anthony Gramiglia did a video on the recent sort of pushback on erotic fiction depicting relationships between humans and monsters. And the excerpts that were read from Morning Glory Milking Farm convinced me that if I bought it, I would mine a small amount of comedy from it. Which
Mission
I have now
accomplished.
done. Yep.
You sure did.
My instincts were correct. Morning Glory Milking Farm. It's about a girl who goes to a farm and wanks off minotaurs.
I'm looking this book up now because I need to know what the cover art for this looks like.
The cover art is wonderful. I think I'm getting it put on my wall. I'm going to get that framed.
It's wonderful. I will say, I think it's a real shame that the title is in front of the pouring milk jug.
Yeah, it does sort of dilute the image somewhat. I
think if there was a version of this cover art that didn't have the title, this would be a beautiful work of art I would hang on my wall.
Yeah, I think I would actually be surprised if they weren't selling like a print of it. And I think I would get that.
Sorry, I've just started looking at the titles of other books by this author, C.M. Nacosta. The title, not so funny, this is a blue ribbon romance. But this one is a woman and a cowman. But he's like in a business suit with like his top button undone and his tie down a bit with a flower crown in his hair. I don't know why. I think it's the fact that, like, the first cover is so... The bull man is the most masculine he could ever be, but this other cover has, like, soft boy bull man. Something about that contrast I wasn't ready for. I wasn't ready for her to be writing about both ends of the bull man spectrum.
I was not prepared to hear the phrase soft boy bull man.
Yeah! But look, if you look up a blue ribbon romance, you'll see the soft boy bull man.
Lovely. Look at that. It's a good video, by the way. Anthony Gramiglia, I forget what the video's called, but you get to look at sort of the usual suspects on the anti-woke right losing the plot over this. But it's a silly erotic novel about wanking off minotaurs. Like, they're running out of things to be upset at, I think, when we're resorting now to this. Which, by the way, where are my royalties? If you read the Vampire Survivor's bestiary, you will realise that I pretty much wrote the entire plot of that in there. I didn't. I just made a very cheap joke about wanking minotaurs off.
This author's got some great book names. I'm just going to read you a couple more of their book titles. Moon-Blooded Breeding Clinic. How to marry a marble marquis.
I've always wanted to know.
This person has clearly carved out a niche, and I cannot fault them for writing a book called Sweet Berries, and the implication is that the berries are his testicles.
Brilliant. It's a big genre. If you want to write about tugging off various creatures, go for it.
And there's no shortage of them. I mean, you could have the whole SCP thing.
There's a gap in the market there. The video did, they spoke to like an editor of these books, and they said the Eldritch and the stuff like that is a fairly underserved market in that subgenre.
Right.
So that's my advice, is if you get into this market as a writer, go with mind flayers and entities.
I'm just imagining wandering through the back rooms, right? And then you find a glory hole after you've been there for like a few days. And then what do? Obviously, you're going to stick your dick in there, right?
You're going to use it. Yeah, obviously. You're either going to stick your dick in it or park up and see what comes out of it. That's where my mind goes. Yeah.
I feel like the way to go with this, if you want to break into the market, is you gotta pick some of the obscure folklore creatures that, like, you can pretty much guarantee no one has written a book about yet. I've just gone and looked up, like, give me a list of some obscure creatures that I could write some sex fanfics about. There's the Tick-Tick. It's sort of like a vampire woman at night, during the day, but then at night it transforms into an animal with a proboscis that it uses to consume the fetuses of pregnant women.
Right.
You could turn that into a sex novel.
Yeah, like maybe replace the fetuses with an adult's penis.
Yeah, I gotta suck all the sperm directly out of your penis with the proboscis.
Yeah, I think the baby eating, not quite as erotic. Proboscis blowjob, that's where the money is.
The Hellhest Q, a demonic horse in Danish folklore that brings death, plagues, and famine. It's 3 out of the 4 horsemen in one.
That's good value.
Yeah, that's right.
For the monster fucker on a budget, there we are.
Sorry,
God.
I found the best one. I know what one I wrote my book about. The Yule Cat is an Icelandic folklore creature that's a gigantic killer cat that will devour anyone who doesn't receive new clothing before Christmas.
What a specific grudge!
I could turn that into a sex beast!
Oh dear. There's food for thought for everyone.
Yeah.
Did you see that? I watched all 2 hours of that Russell Brand interview.
Did you really? Why?
I did! Because it is fascinating. I find it fascinating.
Yeah?
Just because I watched a lot of the Big Brother's Little Mouth back in the day. I was a Big Brother fan for a while. So from sort of the beginning of Brand's big break, I've been aware of him, and I've gone through phases of enjoying him and being unable to stand the fucker. So this has felt to me like the culmination of 20 years.
He truly is the biggest example out there of, oh no, people are catching up with me and my misdeeds. Better try and pivot to Christianity to get out of it, or to religiousness or spirituality of some kind, but without doing the research to be able to hold up to scrutiny doing it. There is something fascinating about that.
He's one of those guys that, like, I could understand the appeal, but always found him repugnant regardless. Like, I get why people enjoyed him in the early days, and his tendency to, be able to identify with the little guy early in his career really gave him a lot of credibility, I think, with people. That allowed him to paper over a lot of his kind of really bizarre behavior. And it's caught up.
I think the man had the talent to have been. He could be right now in the phase of his career where he's doing drama TV and movies to prove that he can be serious, which is the inevitable trajectory of the comic performer. But he can't now because of all the awful things he did.
All of the sex pestness.
All of the sex pestness and you know, the self-destructive behavior before, during, and after that as well. Like, just one of the biggest sort of own worst enemies in entertainment history.
I think he was too weird too long, frankly. Like, he should have made that transition 15 years ago if he was going to do it. And, you know, whatever. He reminds me of Jimmy Savile.
Well, one of the things that has circulated a lot over the past sort of, ever since that Channel 4 documentary came out about his fucking awful behaviour, is a phone call between Russell Brand and Jimmy Savile.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
That is creepy as fuck. Very creepy. One of those things that's like, at the time, people didn't think much about it, as creepy as it was, regardless, but certainly in light of everything, people have gone back to it and they're like, holy fuck, this is just the open depravity of that sort of thing. So,
welcome to Podquisition.
Welcome to Podquisition.
Yeah,
where
welcome.
You can guarantee that the once popular performer has had a far classier, less rapey downfall. Hi, I'm Stephanie Starling, and welcome to the show. Laura!
Do you need saving from this bit?
If you could toss me a floaty ring that I could take to swim to shore.
How about this one? Who's played things this week? And if so, how many?
That's a great idea. Brilliant.
I played a thing.
I played a thing that Conrad ordered me to play, and he was right to do it.
Uh-huh.
And that's the thing I played.
That's the thing he played. It's the only new thing I played as well. Like, there's more Dead Island and Tomodachi, but I think that's been about it.
I've not played a lot new that I can talk about yet. I've got some bits I'll talk about in future weeks, but I did get to play around with a bit of hardware I can talk about a little bit to start us off for today. I got my hands on one of them new Steam controllers.
I'm very curious.
Not the old one from like a decade ago, the new one.
Yeah, I want to know about this.
First of all, thank you, Valve. I emailed them about this, and they were super good about sending me one of these for review. Super appreciate all their help on this. Like a decade ago, Valve tried to do a Steam controller, and I want to talk a little bit about that one to lead into the new one, because I think there is some important context. The old Steam controller was weird. It had a lot of potential, but it was weird. It was a controller that had some of the functions from a traditional game controller. You had your L1R1, L2R2. You had a left analog stick and an A, B, X, and Y buttons, but you didn't have a D-pad or a right analog stick. Both of those were replaced with touch trackpads, very similar to the kind that you have on the Steam Deck today. And for some games, this was a really good controller to have, because even as far back as when the original Steam controller happened, having a controller that you can wirelessly connect at a distance to have mouse input on a controller had a lot of utility. For games that don't... it wasn't always a guarantee at the time that the PC version of game would have controller support, and sometimes just having the ability to have a mouse input would be really good for that. It was really good for stuff like point-and-click adventure games if you want to be sat on the sofa playing them, not sat at your computer. Certain games it worked great for. The problem is, it wasn't great if you were playing a game that actually needed a right analog stick. That trackpad wasn't a great replacement if your game would get confused between you're doing left analog stick and you're doing something that I think is a mouse. Sometimes games would think you were swapping between two different input devices as you were using those inputs on one controller and would get really freaked out. It was a terrible controller to use if you wanted to play anything that required a D-pad, because that trackpad with a slightly recessed D-pad shape in it was not an adequate replacement for a D-pad. I would never want to play 2D side-scrollers on it. But at its core, having a trackpad on a controller, interesting idea. The new Steam controller, it is pricey. I will get that out of the way now. The price in the US is, I believe, $100. Yep. It's £85 in the UK. I think it is going to be worth it to a specific group of players. There is a use case for which I think it is useful, and there are people for whom it's not going to be worth the extra money. Talking about the form factor, in terms of, like, weight and shape and feel, it's very comparable to something like the Xbox Series controller. It's very weight comparable to both the Xbox Series and the DualSense controller for PS5. It's a little wider than either controller, and the section at the back where, like, your middle through smallest fingers rest is lengthier, just because there needs to be room for these trackpads on the controller. It doesn't feel janky. It feels in the hands like a very modern controller. I am impressed at how good of a job they've done in laying out all of their inputs in a very easy-to-reach place. I don't have particularly long fingers, but moving from the analog sticks to the D-pad or face buttons, or down to the trackpads, it's all very, very condensed. All of them are very comfortable to move between without having to change your hand position. This does have a right analog stick this time and a D-pad. The button feel is most comparable, I would say, to... It's more comparable to a PS5 controller than it is an Xbox Series controller, in terms of the buttons aren't clicky in the same way that a Xbox controller's D-pad, for example, feels clicky. The buttons are very quiet on press. They are some of the quietest face buttons I've seen on a controller. Very appreciated. The big reason you would want this controller is those trackpads, and generally speaking, I think that they are very well handled. They are much smaller than the ones were on the original Steam controller back in the day. They feel a little smaller than the ones on the Steam Deck, but their positioning... I don't think they need to be larger. I think they are perfectly adequately sized for what's needed for them. The group of people who are gonna find a use for this controller are people who either want to be playing point-and-click adventure games at a distance on their TV, or are going to be people who tend to play games that are fiddly to play with a controller on PC currently. I remember being the kind of person back in the day, I used to play World of Warcraft with a controller, and doing that used to require occasionally taking your hand off the controller to reach for the mouse, because there was some stuff in that game you just had to do with a pointer. For games like that, this is great. If you're playing something like Raccoon, where... yeah, most of the general inputs in that game on a controller work great. You know, doing the bumpers for throwing your coins out works great. But every time that the menu comes up, it's like, oh, I'm having to use the analog stick to emulate a mouse, and that just doesn't feel great. These trackpads are a much nicer implementation for this game requires me to occasionally mouse and click on things. It has a lot of other inputs that are weirder and harder to explain, and are going to be useful for some people and not for others. I'm still wrapping my head around this one. The side grips where you, like, have your palms on this controller are sensors, and you can go in and set it so that when you take your hand off one side of the controller or put your hand back on one side of the controller, that can be an input. I don't know how often I'm ever going to use that on a controller. That's a baffling thing to offer. The best use case I've found for it is a replacement way of doing the pause menu, where if I just take my hands off the controller, if I just put the controller down, it'll automatically pause because I took my hands off the sides of it.
I thought of another use case. If you're playing a pass and play multiplayer game, it can be the trigger for transferring play from one player to the next as you hand the controller.
Yeah, I'm sure there are use cases like that.
But they're going to be weird shit like that. That's, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There are tools like that on this controller that I go, I'm sure someone's going to have a use for that. I'm not going to know that use case until I find it. It's not the kind of thing where I'm going, oh, I should buy this controller because it's solving a use case. I've been desperate for a controller that can sense I've passed it to someone.
Mm-hmm.
There are 2 back buttons on either side of the controller, so like 4 paddle buttons on the back that are mappable. They're a little lower than I would maybe like them to be. Typically, like on something like the Steam Deck, my middle finger and ring finger tend to be the ones that hover near where the back paddles are. These are a little lower. They are ring finger and smallest finger is sort of where they rest, which are not fingers I typically use for back button. They're not bad by any means. I'm not going to accidentally click them. They have enough resistance to avoid that. They're just a little lower than my personal preference. Maybe the nicest thing about this controller is completely not important. It comes with a USB-C cable for charging that plugs into a little rectangular thing. It is a wireless transmitter for if you want to use the controller wirelessly, and it works really great as that, but it's also a magnetic charging thing, so you just stick it on the back and it starts charging. The reason I love this is I am the kind of clumsy, forgetful fucker that will, with a controller that's plugged in, even if it's just plugged into charge, I will forget that there's a wire plugged into my controller, and I'll yank it in a way where it'll, fuck at the USB port, because I've yanked a cable that's plugged into something. Here, this magnetic puck is instantly the thing that will disconnect. A thing that is designed to break away is the breakaway point. And I really value that. Just, if I am a forgetful, clumsy fucker, or, I move my office chair in a way that, pulls at the cable, that's gonna come away before I do any damage to anything. Generally speaking, this is just it's just a nice, comfortable controller. It's like you took the sides of the Steam Deck and kind of smushed them together in the middle. If playing the Steam Deck you've gone, I do appreciate occasionally having these trackpads here, this is a home controller that has that. I do appreciate that if you're already a Steam Deck user, and you've been, you've either created custom controller profiles for games, or you've used the community profiles that are listed for games, and then you move on to PC using the Steam controller, it will just load up your Steam Deck control profile, because that's already designed for a thing that has the same buttons and trackpad access. That is really convenient. It does only work within Steam as an ecosystem. And this is, I think, the big place where a lot of people aren't gonna get on with this. If you have games on your PC that are not on Steam, by default, it's not like this controller will fall back to being read as a 360 controller if you use it in something else. By default, it just doesn't read as a controller if you're not in Steam. There are ways around this. There is a third-party program you can run to make it act like a 360 controller for non-Steam games, or you can add non-Steam games into Steam and boot them through Steam to get this controller to work.
That's what I was going to ask, I think that's a reasonable compromise. If you're buying a Steam controller, you have Steam.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable compromise. I know other people who are going to go, oh, every time I want to play a game that's not on Steam, I have to find the EXE and add it into Steam and boot it from there. For some people, that's going to be a frustration that is going to make them not want to use this, and I think that's fair.
I do think the Venn diagram of people who want this controller but don't want to deal with that, it exists. There is overlap there for sure.
Oh yeah, I've spoken to those people, but also for me, that's not enough of a reason to dislike this controller. I don't know if it's if it's 85 quid's worth of controller is a pricey controller. I keep trying to think about this. I think a big part of the reason that I am so okay with this being locked down to Steam is that however long ago it was that we started boycotting Microsoft, I stopped using Game Pass on PC.
Yeah.
And as such, I very rarely use any other storefronts on PC.
Yeah.
I occasionally download whatever the free game is on the Epic Store. I sometimes get games on itch. I don't mind adding an itch executable to Steam to be able to use this controller. Some games you wouldn't even need to put through Steam, in that when you're not in Steam, the way that the controller works is it's basically a mouse. You've got the trackpad, left click and right click on your triggers or bumpers. There are point-and-click adventure games where, even without adding them into Steam, trackpad and left and right click would be enough for me to play a point-and-click adventure on the TV without having to have a mouse on my lap. It is a really nicely made controller, and for me, I don't see myself using any other controller on PC now that I have this. This very much is the does-it-all controller, as long as I don't mind all of my games run through Steam. And that's a compromise I'm willing to make for a controller that feels really nice, has quiet buttons, has nice trackpads, has a lot of nice little luxury features on it.
The one thing that I've heard talked about by others that you didn't mention that specifically appeals to me are the sticks. And the way that they have designed those to basically eliminate the risk of wear damage. As someone who goes through a first-party controller at minimum once a year, because I've worn the fucking thing out, that's big for me. You know, that justifies the $100 price point if it's a controller that I like and feels good in my hands.
Yeah, I've not talked about the sticks a lot because the sticks are one of those things. I want more time with this to know how I feel about the sticks in terms of feel. They're one of the things that have taken me a bit of time to get a sense for. Yeah, in theory, these should be pretty drift resistant, and that's great.
As I understand it, Digital Foundry did a whole tear down testing thing that really goes into that stuff in more detail, and it does sound promising.
Yeah, I will say from a teardown perspective, this is such a nice controller for if you ever have to do any repairs or anything on it. I opened the back of it up just out of curiosity for modability stuff for accessibility purposes the other day. There are 7 screws on the back. You know how with a bunch of tech, it feels like they don't want you to get inside because you need a spudger to separate the 2 layers of plastic apart, and it constantly feels like you're going to snap something while you're trying to separate it. No, you take the 7 screws out the back of this, the back plate just comes off, 0 resistance. There are no ribbon cables between the back plate and the body. The battery is not glued in any way. The battery is instantly available to replace, and it feels the most we want you to be able to replace this if the battery life on this ever dies. It is super friendly to just open up and be able to see all the ribbon cables already plugged in to go, oh, I can very obviously see what that is that's plugged in. If I need to unplug or check a ribbon cable, I can see what it is and where it comes from straight away, and it's accessible without having to take more boards out. It does seem like a really user-replaceable or fixable controller, and I do like that a lot.
It all sounds very interesting. I like I say, I need to have it in my hand before I can put that kind of money down, but I'm looking forward to finding an opportunity.
The money is the big thing. That is a lot for a controller.
It is, yeah.
And in this economy, it's...
I don't know that I'd have put the money down. Again, thank you, Valve. I will say this, Valve was super good when I reached out to them. I was like, I want to do an accessibility review. Before they'd even done anything else, they were like, yeah, that sounds good. What's your postcode? Let's send us your details. I was like, oh, okay. So I do appreciate them helping out with that. The price is the barrier. Yeah. I don't know if I'd have checked this out without them sending one. Yeah, Steam controller, It's a really nice controller. I want a bit more time with it. I've had it for about a day and a half at this point. I'll probably know better how I feel about it a week or so from now, but... Yeah, okay. What have you both been playing? What's the thing you've both played this week?
Conrad.
Yeah.
Do you want to take point on this really rather lovely thing?
I don't, and I'll tell you why. It is... I've been struggling to be like, how do I even explain what Titanium Court is? Mechanically, it is a match 3 with that informs an auto battler.
Yeah.
Is kind of at its core.
Yeah. But a match 3 that's also a strategy game.
Yes.
Because the matching is basically you've got a little headquarters that you can move around. Regardless of anything else, you can move this court around, and there are enemy courts that will spawn, enemies at intermittent points in the next phase. So you can shift this thing around, but you can also match 3 of any tile on this board. There are various resources that you can get by matching 3 of 3 water tiles will get you 1 water resource, and those resources are used to spawn your own little soldiers and gatherers. And you can also match enemy courts to eliminate those from the board. And there's no timer or anything like that, because the idea is to strategize. There's no real time. There's a limit to the
number of moves you can make.
You've got a set number of turns, set number of moves.
Well, it's not even really set, because in many of these match games, certain combinations or, when you get a rain of multiple tiles, it'll extend additional moves for you.
Yeah. So there's an amount of energy that is spent by performing a
that's the way to...
move, and by
Yeah.
performing combos, you can get some of the energy back. But the overall thing is using the tiles, which also double as terrain types, to get your core in a favourable position, because the next phase is a real-time auto-battler, where the enemy courts, if they can spawn enemies, because some are basically empty, at various points, and it shows you on the timer, like the timer bar, when the enemies will spawn, and then you can spawn your own soldiers or resource gatherers that will like go to a certain tile and gather a certain amount of stuff, and that is how that plays out. So the main swing of the actual gameplay side is this 2-stage thing of arranging tiles in a match 3 format to gather resources and reposition yourself, and then picking which units will spawn in which order, and then letting that play out. And the idea is to navigate through this war, and then there's a boss at the end with some really fun mechanics of how they work in this sort of tile-based format. And then, on top of that, you've got this charmingly, entertainingly written little story. Sort of that plays out between, and sometimes during, these gameplay sections, which are just called wars. It's an adorable game and a fucking brilliant idea.
I'm fascinated and baffled watching footage of it.
Right? Yeah.
It is deceptively...
You can see.
Yeah, it's very easy to wrap your head around when you have it in front of you, and quite difficult to actually convey what's going on.
Yeah, I was trying to follow your description, because, like, at first glance, it looked like Dwarf Fortress, but with occasional, like, narrative jokes happening at me.
Well, and what's so great about it is the game has no difficulty explaining itself.
No.
Everything sort of rolls out, unfurls naturally. It introduces elements. It's very, like, thoughtful and considerate in its approach to explaining its own mechanics.
Like, bear in mind, I automatically got it. That should give you an idea of how easy it is and how well this game communicates what it's doing. I struggle at points with it only because I don't have a good mind for strategy. I never have. I'm better with turn-based than real-time. I struggle a lot with forethought. So knowing when and where to move the court, which just moving the court spends a lot more energy than matching tiles.
Mm-hmm.
And accounting for what terrain I'm going to need around me to block which enemy types. And there's a lot. It's also straightforward, but there's a lot to potentially consider.
And so many different approaches, because you'll get jobs that completely change the nature of the court and your approach to how you play.
The gulf of difference between those jobs is impressive in its own right.
Yeah, it really is. I've only got 2 unlocked so far. Because another thing the game is so good.
It really is.
It really is that, and I want to savor it, and I don't want to rush. And there's also a certain, like, even though I feel, and the game does everything in its power to not make things feel weighty in a way that's intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I am intimidated by it in a weird way.
I think it's because it does a really good job of emphasizing that this is, no matter how high the stakes are, there is an undercurrent of low stakes running through it. It emphasizes that these fairies that they're referred to, the characters in the court with you, will die brutally in this war. They'll be back the next day. Like, but then, after communicating how trivial that is, then the game might throw something at you to consider of, like, that's a shit life. They're in this eternal war that they don't know why they're there. And they're all a bit goofy and silly, but they're also in a sort of hell. And the game's just constantly fluctuates between that of telling you it doesn't really sort of matter, and it's very silly, and, you know, they sell love potions, which are not like the rapey ones that are normally in fiction. They make you love something you might already like a little bit more, and you get the first love potion you get is the potion of liking baseball. But amidst that silliness is also some thoughtful stuff, and I'm actually on the hook with the plot, like like the character of Puck, like all that stuff. I'm like, where is that going? I care.
And the writing is really great too, because it holds these two perspectives very well. Your protagonist having an innate understanding of what it is to be a human being and live in our world, and the absolute incomprehension of the fairies for that.
Yeah.
Like, they can't conceive of what it is to be human. And I love stories that handle that interplay well. And this does. And it's very funny, but it's also kind of sweet. And yeah.
It's not made me laugh out loud so far.
No.
But it's one of those examples of writing where I might not be laughing as much as I am with some comedies, but I am more consistently smiling throughout. Yes. The game's plot, like its various dialogue scenes, I am constantly smiling.
I've already downloaded this and booted it up while you've both been talking about it, because you've sold me on this real well.
Laura, don't play it while we're talking though, because part of that opening scene uses music in such a good way.
Okay. I will close it, I will stop, I will come back to it with music.
What really sold me on it was the way the game's title and opening story and music sort of play together. Because the soundtrack so far has been very limited, but my fucking god is it catchy. The battle music is so good.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I already got really on board with just the opening little hint at narrative that was happening. Without saying too much, the suggestion that the writers are racing to keep writing enough to just keep ahead of what I am playing, delightful. Yeah. I love that as a bit of world building.
Oh yeah, the presentation is so good as well.
Yeah.
Because they've got portrait boxes for dialogue, so a little picture with a character in it. But rather than animate actions when they happen, they will animate the portrait box. So if they want to show like a dog jumping, they will have a dog in a dialogue portrait box and just make the box jump. And that sounds like a little thing, but when you see it all work together and you constantly see panels popping up at various points, it's quite impressive just how minimal they manage to make various sequences and events look, but in a way that really strikes you. There's a very strong visual style in that, and I'm pleased every time I see it. Little things like multiplying panels of a trumpet to show a procession of trumpets. Yeah, I realise as I say it vocally, it doesn't sound impressive.
No.
But when you see it...
No, that's like, I want to sell this game so hard, and every time I think about, how I would phrase it, like, that's not interesting. Like, what I'm saying cannot possibly convey the experience, which is, yeah.
Yeah. And look, I could tell that is the case, which is why I went to try and boot it up, and then was like, well, no, apparently I shouldn't.
It might not.
It definitely sounds like one of those games that's hard to grasp until you're there.
Yeah, and I hope I'm not overselling it. It's just the moment this clicked for me was right near the beginning when the music kicked in, and I'm like, because it speaks so well to the game's, again, minimal presentation, that they managed to, with just text and static images and music, they managed to have what I consider to be an exciting movie introduction scene. There is something about it that feels epic, even though it is just a bit of music, a bit of text, and some flat portrait pictures. They just merge it together so well. And it's a running thing throughout the whole thing that they use the match 3 puzzle format in other contexts as well, outside of battle, to represent various other actions and events. And it's one of those games that is it's already, and I'm not all that far into it, it's already in my mind become a top tier example of how to do a lot with a little.
Yes,
because it is so that what this game is made of is so straightforward and minimalist, but it says a lot. It is a lot, all in a good way. Yeah, I am impressed. And the immediacy with which I was impressed as well. This is the kind of game that would normally have to grow on me. It's not fully my wheelhouse. Elements of it are, but I've never been all that excited by like match 3 games, and auto battlers can be kind of hit and miss. So even a game of this quality would normally I'd have to acclimate and warm to it a bit more. I was all in on this straight away. I will say that music helped. I cannot praise the music enough. Just that one tune that plays, the twangy guitar tune, it's so good. Yeah. Super good. Also, It's got a nice sort of... When text adventures started having pictures as well as text, it's got that vibe as well. It's got sort of...
It does. Well, it's that limited color palette that really drives that home.
Yeah. Plus the sort of navigating the court between battles with which direction do you want to go in. It makes me think of those early sort of text with picture adventures like Colonel's Bequest or Manning, like all those sort of really old school ones. Yeah, super good. I am.
Nice.
Thank you for recommending that to me, Conrad, because with the emphasis you put on it.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm just glad you were here to explain it.
Yeah. Beyond that, what have I been playing this week? Not much I can talk about this week. I've finished playing Vampire Crawlers. I saw the credits roll on that. I've still got some unlocks I want to unlock on it, but I have been really impressed at the slow build of mechanical complexity and the ramp up to ridiculous, overwhelming builds that slowly opens up to you. By the end of that game, being smart about which 3 crawlers I took as my starting set in order to have multiple instances of the cards that my deck was defaulting to were allowing me to keep drawing more cards and adding more mana and strengthening myself to have these overly lengthy turns where I just kept not running out of cards, not being limited by my mana drain, having enough wild card availability that my combo just never had to drop. I was getting up to like 15 or 20 combo and a single card was just like wiping out entire fights. Once you start being able to take Arcana with you, and particularly if you get lucky on some of the early floors and get to have multiple Arcana at once, it is not nearly as much as Vampire Survivors in terms of here are instantly the tools with which you can straight away break the game. But those kind of runs where it's like, oh, the game is having to start introducing mechanics to force me to move on to my next turn. The game has this mechanic where if you are able to draw through your entire deck and start drawing the discard pile and then draw through the whole deck again, enough times in a single turn without letting an enemy take a turn, the game starts putting cracks in the cards going, look, you can chance it to keep going, but we think you've had enough turn by now. Please let the enemy at least once have a turn before you keep going. And there is something really satisfying about having the game just have to acknowledge you've made enough of an infinite death machine here that we're gonna have to encourage you to let the enemy at least try and touch you. That's been a lot of fun. I'm very much enjoying that.
It's a good game. It's a very good game. I haven't had much time to get into it just because, ironically, I'm working on other Vampire Survivors shit. But getting to play more of it than I did when I sort of went to look at the earlier build was it is very well put together. I like how fast you can move if you sort of get into the flow of playing the cards. It doesn't ever feel ponderous, despite being turn-based and card-based. It has a real it moves really smoothly. I wouldn't have used the voiceovers they use. They're good. I wouldn't have used those voices. They don't talk in that game how the characters talk in my head when I write about them. And it bothers me. It only bothers me, and it's not an actual problem. But yeah, good stuff.
One of my favourite little things about it that I've just remembered is worth talking about is if you go back and replay a level that you've already cleared at least once, you get like a big set off the nukes button with like the plastic cap over it, the big danger do not push button. And if you press, I think it's the Y button a couple of times, you can just kill everything on the first floor of that area to go, look, you've already completed this level before, we will give you the full experience points and let you pick up all the items from the first floor, but we'll let you you won't have to fight anything until you get to floor 2. We'll let the first floor be a gimme because you've done this place before. That's a really nice thing. I love that.
I'm all for that kind of convenience and just not making you retread shit. Especially the games that are based so much in replaying them. Cut out the boring shit and then people will replay it even more. Yeah, very, very smart stuff. Good game.
Yeah. Have either of you played anything else you want to talk about this week?
It's more of the same. I wrote a blog post on the Patreon about it, but I've got 3 video scripts on the go because hyperfixations keep happening, and I start writing a script, and then I get into something else, and I'm like, I'm going to start writing another script. So I'm actually planning to do a video about Dead Island, of all things, just because I realised while replaying it, I've got a lot to say about it. Sort of about its worth as a game, because I've seen other people talk about it, and the general consensus is, well, we've got Dying Light, and Dying Light is Dead Island, but with more stuff, and in their opinion, better. Which, again, I've got a very unique opinion about that. It does have worth, some interesting worth. And one thing I was thinking about last night is this fascinating idea that a lot of it's generic, especially when you leave that resort area and then you're in a sort of zombie place, more of a city area, and people talk about how generic it is. But I was looking at the landscape of gaming at that time, and it's one of these pieces of media that, because so much has happened in the genre since, it now looks more generic than it once was. And that's something I want to talk about as well. Dead Island released at a time where the zombie boom hadn't become saturated yet. In terms of games, we had Resident Evil, which for a long time was the only real dedicated zombie-themed series. We had Dead Rising and Left 4 Dead. And in terms of high-profile games, there wasn't much more beyond that when it came to zombies. Obviously, team-based co-op games are a dime a dozen now. But back then, this game, sort of riffing off of Borderlands in several ways, was still quite a new thing. So Borderlands but with zombies there was a sort of uniqueness to that, or certainly more unique than it would be now. So I found that quite fascinating. Plus, having left the resort chapter and gone to Moresby, the city/town area, I don't think that area gets enough credit. It's scary. It is actually legitimately scary. The way they've designed the various winding streets and alleys so zombies can come from multiple directions. The sound design, which I'm going to dedicate an entire part of the video just to that game's sound design. Some of the best in terms of making you frightened of zombies. The guttural, hateful sometimes screams of the zombies. And in Moresby, there is a constant regular sound of zombie crowd screams in the distance that constantly gives this whole map a real intimidating feel. And there's a high-pitched wind that sometimes blows that manages to hit the right pitch of the really fast infected zombies that scream and run at you. But it's different enough that it's not an unfair trick, but it's just enough that you're like, did one of those fucking things see me? I don't think that area gets the credit it deserves, either for sort of it being more unique for its time period and the surprising, because I've not played this game in a very long time, but the surprising tenseness and horror of that area's atmosphere. And I say this even after a random online player turned up and dropped a gun on the floor that makes zombies' head explode in one hit. I really panicked because I didn't think about what I might be picking up in this 2011 game that for some reason had players in it still. Not many. Maybe less than 10. But when I picked up a gun and realised that it had an ammo count in the billions, I was like, I might have picked up something dodgy. Oh, look, when I aim with the iron sights, my head goes through the gun. This isn't good. Turns out it's fucking good. The gun is good. And then nothing cursed has happened. So I like to think, and maybe this is me being naive, but I like to think there are these Dead Island players still. They've broken the game over their knee. They've exploited its notoriously buggy nature to dupe all sorts of shit. And whenever they see a lower level player, they must see one maybe once every few years. But when they see them, they turn up and just give them a treat. That's my headcanon for what happened.
Yeah. I like
that idea. Like I say, nothing's happened. It's not fucked with my game in any way.
No.
Plus, on your own, that game had some areas that were really focused towards a full team of 4 players. So having an insta-kill death gun in my inventory is handy for those areas. There's a quarantine area that you only ever have to go to for one optional quest, but it is fucking horrifying in there. Again, I'm going to dedicate a whole sort of part of the video to it. Fucking terrifying. Especially with those really fast-running zombies, which... some of the most intimidating zombies in a game. A lot of it due to that sound design. And just how wide their aggro range is. So you hear this furious, rage-filled scream, and then snarling getting louder and louder. It's seen you long before you saw it. Or it's really far away and it's running at you like Lancelot in Monty Python's Holy Grail, just down the street. And the first time that happened, is still burned into my memory because it was a very memorable moment. That's that. I've been playing quite a bit of Dead Island, and it's not a great game, by the way. It's not one I'd really struggle to recommend it to anyone, actually. But I think it deserves a lot more credit than it gets for several interesting reasons. Yeah.
I had one little bit of news I want to very quickly throw on at the end of this episode before we finish, just because it's my favourite quote I've read this week, and I want to share it with you both.
Mm-hmm.
So you might remember, maybe a decade or so ago, there was a while when Nintendo games just weren't buyable on Amazon for a while.
Oh, I don't...
This was like the Wii and... this was part of the Wii and DS era,
Okay.
when they were really blowing up. Amazon just did not have access to Nintendo games. And it was a bit weird, and no one ever quite knew why it was. And that sort of turned itself around by the time that the Switch and stuff was happening. But Reggie Fils-Aimé was giving an interview as part of a series of game lectures at New York University and NYU, and he's talked about what went down there. And I want to share this story purely for one quote, which we'll get to. You'll know it when I get there. To give a little the TLDR version of what went down. The Wii and the DS were both selling incredibly well, and Amazon wanted, at the time, they didn't want to sell Nintendo games unless they could sell them for the cheapest prices anywhere. They wanted to be considerably cheaper than Walmart's prices. They wanted to be, like, not technically a monopoly, but might as well be a monopoly at the prices they're able to reach. And the only way they'd be able to sell them at those prices without taking a huge loss would be to convince Nintendo to sell their games to Amazon at a considerably lower price than they're selling them to any other retailer.
Something that Nintendo notoriously is very flexible on is pricing.
Right. So I'm gonna read to you the quote here, and you'll know when I get to the bit that I was hoping for. Essentially what Amazon wanted is an obscene amount of support, financial support, so they could have the lowest price and beat Walmart. I literally said to the Amazon executive, you know that's illegal. I can't do that. You know, you then get silence on the other end of the call, and it's like, well, but this is what I want. You know, hello, Amazon, it would be illegal for me to, like, cut you this kind of a deal undercutting all other competitors. Yeah, but I want you to, though.
Yeah, that is such a lovely snapshot of the corporate mindset. Yeah, I've heard other stories before from people about when it boils down to, like, trying to explain to an executive that what they want is not just, like, unethical or something like that, but logistically impossible. Like, this cannot be done.
Yeah, but I want it, though.
Yeah, I was talking to a dev quite a while back, and they wanted to spend $5,000 on a $10,000 idea. And it was explained to them in detail why this can't work. And they came back with, right, what we did was we pitched your $5,000 idea and the $10,000 idea to a focus group. And they liked the $10,000 idea. Right, but you still want to spend $5,000 on it? Yep. But we can't do that. Yeah, but the focus test liked it. And that's it. Like, as soon as they decide they want a thing, they truly believe the world and what is possible within it will rearrange itself to suit them.
And apparently, for many years, Amazon couldn't sell Nintendo games because one person at Amazon simply went, I know you've told me that's illegal, but I want it, though.
Just cut their fucking nose off, because no, companies don't want some money, they want all of the money. And if Amazon could only have some money, they would not sell the hottest fucking commodity in electronic entertainment for its era.
Right.
Imagine that. Imagine being there at the height of Nintendo's success in the 2000s and being like, I tell you what, we'll pass on selling the Wii. I just that fucking
We'll get
dense.
back on board by the time the Wii U's happening. We won't sell the Wii.
Oh, God. I can imagine the executive that got fired for that. Good news, boss! We got the Wii U! Fucking hell.
There you go. That's what one story this week I thought you'd enjoy.
I love that. I fucking love that. Well, Laura, you're content with some money. Not all of the money in the entire world, and maybe you could talk about...
I mean, I wouldn't say no to all of the money, but
nice,
you know...
It'd be nice, but until you're recognised as deserving of it, as you are, maybe you could tell people about what it is you do for your earnings.
You can find all the stuff I do on the internet at Laura K. Buzz. Patreon's a great place to find all of the stuff what I'm doing. It's a good place to financially support me, but even if you don't, it's a good place to get like regular updates on like all the stuff I'm posting. Let's have a look. What have I been posting recently? I've got an unboxing and disassembly video for the Steam controller, focusing on accessibility aspects of it. There will be an accessibility review of the Steam controller going up in the next day or two, probably. I do a podcast called Queer and Pleasant Strangers, where me and my wife talk about pop culture things we've been enjoying that are not video games. This most recent episode that went up, you can hear me talking about the terrible CGI animated kids movie Hit Pig. It is one of the worst films I've ever seen. What else is there recently? You can check out Where Everybody Has Gone Before, where I talk with Jeffrey Bunting about randomly selected episodes of Star Trek. The most recent one we talked about involved many characters having their bodies possessed in an episode of Deep Space Nine. You can check out Dice Funk. It's a Dungeons & Dragons podcast. Each season's its own self-contained story. We are just wrapping up Season 12 right now, which is where I've been playing the middle sibling in a trio of dragons. Check that out. We're just coming to the end of that story at the moment. There's other stuff as well, but Laura K. Buzz, you'll find all the stuff I'm doing on the internet. What about you, Conrad? Where are you out on the internet?
Oh, you can find me at Conrad Zimmerman on Blue Sky, and you can hang out with me on Twitch at twitch.tv/thatconradzimmerman. I'm usually on Sundays, Mondays, Tuesdays. You could buy anti-capitalist propaganda and Jimquisition merchandise at mercenarycreative.com. And everything I do online gets supported through Patreon at patreon.com/fistshark. And you know who else has a Patreon? Stephanie Sterling.
That's correct. Patreon.com/Jimquisition, which supports this show, the other show, and reviews on thejimquisition.com. Hopefully I'll have a Tomodachi Life review up. I've got it finished, and I was all confident, ready to post it, and then realised that my usual way of getting the screenshots won't work because I use Nintendo's app, and they disabled it. So I've got to drag wires around to get that hooked up some way else. But that is ready to be posted. Other than that, you can check out my work in Vampire Survivors, Quantum Witch, Date Everything. There is a grimoire book coming out later this year for Vampire Survivors and some other stuff that's in the works. Until then, though, thank you all so much for supporting us, and we will see you next week. Bye!
Bye.
Bye.